What is good, dear friends? Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roasters Warm-Up Sessions podcast. We're doing a little bit of a sequel to our last podcast, which we were talking about how do you describe what your coffee tastes like? And that's a loaded question. And oftentimes most people will just resort to, bold, smooth, or, rich or whatever, which they're not bad, but I feel like there's a lot more going on in coffee. But before we jump into that, let's pour some Batchy.
Let's go.
What do we got going on here?
What's that? Tasty Kenya.
That tasty Kenya. Let's go. Kenya has just been treating us so well. I've been enjoying it so much on drip at Makeworth. Brewing it up here on pour over. It's just been such a pleasure. So juicy. We cupped it today too. I was pretty stoked about that cupping.
Mm-hmm.
Just juicy, nice, light, some cantaloupe, cantaloupe, kind of like a limeade stuff going on.
Good sweetness.
Yeah, it's very candied, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Almost tastes like you're eating like a green apple, like Jolly Rancher, where it's sweet, but it's got like a candied flavor to it.
Yeah.
So
We need to save this grind size right here because I think we nailed it.
really,
I rarely say that. Let this be known.
20 brews later, 25. This is the 26th episode, so 26 brews later, we got it. But you did use the cone on the brewer.
Cone.
Yeah.
Plus, we
That's
did
kinda
a whole
funky.
different ratio, too, because we only had 726 grams of water.
Yeah.
So-
What do you think? Do you think that even plays a role? Like, do you think maybe homebrewers, they don't max out quite where the specs say they max out at?
Yeah. I think Lance just recently did a little, review of the ratio 6, and he was also talking about kind of the sweet spot where he gave the best brew, and it was slightly under a liter, I believe. So, Yeah, this is super tasty.
Yeah.
This is very complex. This is better than the Makeworth batch. I feel like the Makeworth batch has become like our standard. Like, that's what we... Is it a good brew or a bad brew? Kind of comparison.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty. Not sure how it's mixing with the teriyaki I just had. But yeah, it's tasty. So when we're throwing out these flavor notes with coffees, like for example this Kenya, like we have, what do we have on the bag? I forgot. We have a
Cantaloupe.
limeade, and peach,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Are those actual, like, I mean, just to kick this off with, for people who are just like interested in just getting into this, like, we're not adding those flavors into the coffee. This isn't flavored coffee.
Right.
This isn't, any preservatives. We're not like soaking the coffee in like cantaloupe juice or something. Even though we could do that, and people do that with just green coffee. Similar process, but I don't know. It's controversial.
I mean, slightly reminds me of that one famous viral reel or YouTube video of folks brewing with a slice of orange on top.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. We don't do that as well. This is not like after we put an orange peel into the carafe and we brew coffee over it. That's not what's going on. So what a lot of these things are coming from is, which we touched up on last episode. So if you haven't seen that, go back, episode 25, I believe. But what is going on is actually there's acidity on the sugars on the molecular level of inside within the coffee bean. There's a lot of these things that are stored up, which are very similar to the things that we find in apples, cantaloupe, fruit, watermelon. It's those sugars, it's that sweetness, it's all that stuff going on. And coffee actually has around 850 aroma and flavor over that. 850 aroma and flavor compounds, which is insane.
It's a lot.
And I think wine is at like 300.
Oh, wow.
That's bonkers to think. And so it's like, I mean, the wine world sounds crazy for picking out flavor, you know, when they're so limited, where coffee is even that much more complex. So, any thoughts to that?
Yeah, man, I would also say that within all of that complexity within flavors and the nuances, my main reminder, I think we bring this up way too much, but it doesn't hurt to bring it up again, is that at the end of the day, it's how we decode the experience that we're having.
Oh, yeah.
So flavor is basically we're explaining using words what we're experiencing, but it is a tangible thing, but it's also not a tangible thing, if that makes any sense. Because when we're talking about our flavors in the coffees, we stopped writing tastes like, and we started writing reminds us of.
Yeah, totally.
Because a lot of the times these different nuances, they're basically things that like stimulate or touch in our brain that helps us understand like, oh, this experience right now is like a peach.
Yeah.
But technically, does this coffee have, like you were saying earlier, it doesn't have any peaches in it.
Yeah.
But it reminds us of the flavor that a peach would. So there's that complexity to that whole flavor conversation, because we're relating to maybe a past memory or a past experience of something that is similar to that.
And, you know, when you eat a Fuji apple or a Granny Smith apple or, you know, a specific kind of apple, there's a name for those apples.
Yeah.
Well,
for a reason.
It's a Fuji apple.
Yeah.
Because it's a Fuji apple.
Yeah.
Where, you know, for the longest time ever in the world, we've called coffee just coffee.
Yeah.
That's it. It's coffee. Well, that, you know, just like any other fruit, and coffee is a fruit, it's a cherry that grows on a tree at different elevations. There's different varietal of beans. There's even the grand big like Arabica, Robusta. Now there's other family trees that from that people are discovering. So it's like just saying coffee doesn't quite do the trick to be able to explain some of these things. And so hence why, like, once again, like, I remember when I first started seeing coffee tasting notes and started drinking coffee with this mindset, which one of my most memorable experiences was right when I moved back from Portland, and Bellingham had no good coffee. Like, it was dreadful. And I was like, how am I going to move back to Bellingham with no great coffee around? And there was a coffee bar that was under a bunch of apartments, almost like a basement. And it was called the Onyx Coffee Bar. And they were only open on Saturdays. They only made pour overs, and they had no cream, no sugar in there. You just walk in, get a coffee. That's it. That's literally what that was it. Just black coffee.
Yeah.
And I remember going in there, and the barista, I mean, back then was Kevin, and he would just share some of his thoughts about coffee. And he'd like, oh, this has flavor notes, tasting notes of this. And sometimes I'd drink it and I'd be like, okay, I see where you're going. And sometimes I'm like, wait, I don't understand this at all.
Yeah.
None of that makes sense. This just tastes like black coffee.
Yep.
And so, however, on the other hand, what really helped me the more that I started drinking it and acquiring that taste for it, but what helped me was discussing that with other people. So next time going back, every Saturday getting my drip coffee, hearing him talk about these coffees that I'm drinking was like, oh, so I can kind of learn what he's kind of talking about when he's calling these, flavor notes, or what the coffees are reminding him of.
Yep.
And the goal isn't to regurgitate what somebody else is saying. It's just to give words to what you're tasting.
Right.
And sometimes all we can do is say, oh, it tastes like fruit. Tastes like chocolate. Yeah. Because that's the vocab that we have.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why for us as roasters, it is crucial to be cupping with other people. Because not only are we always learning different vocabulary, but we're also seeing how other folks are able to describe the same experience that we're having. Like one of the things that we've done is cupped with local roasters in Bellingham got together and just, set up a cupping and just talked about it. Very lax, not intense. Like,
Yeah. No
it's
cupping forms.
no cupping
sheets.
forms, no nothing. It's simply to learn from one another
Yeah.
and to do it together. But then again, like today, we did a facsimile cupping, which, go ahead, describe facsimile a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm not good
facsimile
at
is
that.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty much Ryan Brown, which is a very infamous green coffee buyer, and then Scott Rayo, also pretty famous in the industry. They pretty much started buying green coffee in fairly small amounts, and every month they'll ship out to all the subscribers a small dose of each of 4 different coffees, and then they'll all jump on like a live Zoom call that you can watch and taste coffees with them. And then Ryan Brown will take on other people in the industry and bring in them to cup with them and kind of share what they think about the coffee. And once again, the cool thing with that is you're able to hear how people are talking about the same coffee that you're tasting. Now, is this a little bit inaccurate? Sure, because they're not taking into consideration like everybody's different water, kind of different grinder, how they're taking, but for the most part, it's just giving you words to what you're tasting. And that's been super helpful.
Right.
And it's just been such an enjoyable experience. So
Yeah, that's what I've enjoyed about it is because you don't always get to cup with someone like Ryan or Babinski. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These big names who have cupped and tasted coffee for a long time. So their knowledge base and their vocabulary is on a whole different level. So it's very encouraging to experience a coffee, think of what you're experiencing, and then hear them say something maybe similar or even different. And you're like, oh, that's something I've wanted to understand and taste, and now I have words to describe that.
Yeah, one of the biggest times I remember that really clicked with me, which I think I shared this on the other podcast, was when I would cup with Shay, who is a Q grader, lots of experience in the industry, and he would ask what I'm tasting, and I would name something that he was tasting the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And when I started to pick up on those things, and when you move back, us starting to cup the same coffees together.
Yeah.
The encouraging thing is like this, where it's not like a lot of people will actually make fun of this and say, oh, you guys are just making it up, kind of like wine, like, oh, it's just, a marketing scam or whatever. But the interesting thing is if you come into a room with people who know how to taste and just give them a silent blind cupping and give them like a little notepad to take notes. Oftentimes, what you'll find is most of them will probably have very similar notes. Yeah. And to me, that was eye-opening because I'm like, oh no, like it's the more you do this, the more you're able to explain and share what you're talking about. And it's not something you're just pulling out of thin air.
Right.
And once again, it goes back to that coffee has over 800 aroma and flavor compounds. So those compounds, you're also tasting in different foods that you're enjoying. Yeah. And in meals and fruits and all those stuff. So you're not just making it up out of thin air. Your brain is just trying to process it. Yeah. What do you think, like, I want to kind of go into a little bit of like cupping notes and flavor notes. When we're talking about, let's say acidity, what's that mean? Like, what does it, how would you taste a lemon in a coffee?
Gosh, how? I mean,
maybe how's not the right word.
It tastes
what
like
does it taste like?
Like a lemon. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to explain, but yes, there's different types of acidity. So within coffee, and some of that acidity is a little brighter, or sharpness is more of a mouthfeel thing. But there's like brighter acidity with less sweetness. And in my mind, on that scale, like the brightest, tartest acidity would be similar to a lemon. Like, would you agree? Like that's kind of how I see it in my mind. Of course, yeah. And then things like gradually get sweeter from then. You can say like a grapefruit is a little sweeter than a lemon. Maybe like a lime is also a sweeter lemon. But you can also go as far as saying like a strawberry. Strawberry is fairly sweet, but it also has a lot of acidity. So there's different acidity, like not only levels, but types of acidity in a coffee that you get to describe with flavor. So a lot of the times, like on a coffee bag, when those different flavor notes are posted, they're describing a combination of acidity and sweetness.
Yeah.
And sometimes this kind of acidity with this type of sweetness equals a strawberry or a blueberry. Or sometimes, I was looking at something, I was like, whoa, that's a very interesting way. Gosh, I don't remember off the top of my mind right now. But that's why sometimes like labels and those descriptors can be very, very specific. And I think that that's important, like to be specific. But also sometimes it's not really helpful.
Yeah.
Because you can really, really define a sweet acidity when you know it tastes like again, like a strawberry. Yeah. But if you don't have that frame of reference or are you able to decode that label, then it doesn't help you at all. Then you might as well just say it tastes good.
Of course.
See what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Well, when let's say you see lemon on a flavor note or on a bag, without saying it tastes like a lemon, how would you describe that flavor or that experience?
Definitely like tart.
Yeah.
I don't want to say sour because sour is technically like a bad word. Like it's a form of under extracted, but that tartness, that brightness, and apart from literally tasting like lemon, those are, I would say, my major indicators of acidity that's that strong.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
What about?
Of course, that makes
what
sense.
about you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking just kind of to give people listening kind of like, for me at least, like when I was just starting off, I was like lemon. Okay, well, I mean, everybody who drinks this coffee, there's still that generic coffee flavor.
Yes. Yeah. For sure.
And it's actually the bulk of it.
Yeah.
But that coffee flavor kind of breaks down into subcategories, which we're calling out now as like, these flavor notes or these things that remind us of other things, But for the most part, it's like, how do you find these things within the general basic flavor of just saying it tastes like coffee? It's coffee, And for me, that was challenging. Hence why I just wanted to ask that question, because I think that would have been helpful for me to say, oh, like what they're saying is lemon. What you should be kind of tasting for or keeping your, ears open or eyes peeled for is look for maybe some brightness in the cup or some kind of like tartness.
Yeah.
And then maybe just start by saying that's tart. Well, I'll just say that's lemon, just start there. That way it'll give you a general direction and then you can break it down, and, I mean, oftentimes sometimes we're like trying to decipher between like, is that lemon, is that lime, or is that grapefruit, or is that a lemon peel? Sometimes
lemon rind.
And then it's like,
exactly.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, but that's like a whole crazy, that's very, very niche and subcategory. But that was kind of like the thought behind it. How would you say then are you, for example, if we were to say blueberry or blackberry, which are pretty prevalent in, Ethiopian coffees, natural processed coffees, what are you looking for that can help you get there without saying blackberry or blueberry?
Yeah, when it comes to berries, sweetness is what catches my just attention right away. And it's that combination of acidity and a sweet acidity that catches my attention. And it's much different than, let's say, chocolate. I think chocolate is one of those easy flavor notes that you can notice right away. But also, when you're cupping for more, you can basically cut that chocolate idea out when you're tasting acidity. I don't know. That sounded super confusing. But when something is so prevalent like chocolate, in a sense, you can be aware when it's not there. Because it's clearly not there. There's coffees that not all coffees have this chocolatey flavor. So when it's not there, then I basically start digging in more into what am I experiencing in that sweetness of that acidity. I think today we had an example. I was dialing in some new pour over coffees, and one of the flavor notes was cheer wine. And we literally stood around with the staff, and there's just 3 of us. And we basically discussed, like, when was the last time you had Cheerwine? What is Cheerwine?
It's the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah. And I think I'm saying it right. Cheerwine? Yeah. It's like a cherry cola. It's a very, very old, like, classic cherry cola. And it doesn't taste like a cherry Coke, because Coke has a significant flavor. It almost tastes like a sparkling, very, very sweet maraschino cherry.
Okay.
But it's also not the same as a maraschino.
Yeah.
It's so niche.
Yeah.
But if you know what Cheerwine tastes like, then you would have been able to call that out instantly. So our conversation was like, there's something there, that some kind of fruit. It kind of tastes like maybe a cherry, but I don't know. It's not exactly a cherry.
Yeah.
And that's where we're like, oh, Cheerwine. And I've had Cheerwine before, so I was able to kind of talk about what I'm experiencing in my mouth that would remind me of that, if that makes sense.
Which that reminds me of the fact that, like, we're always trying to taste new things, and also remind us of things that we're tasting. You know, whether that's, you know, going to the grocery store and be like, man, I don't remember the last time I had a watermelon. Snag a watermelon. You know, you don't remember the last time you're walking by some, you know, some dates. You pick up some
dried
dates.
fruit.
Like we like I recently had tried some dates covered in chocolate, which is so weird. Like, you would never think that is even a combo that you'd enjoy, but it was actually kind of oddly good, and it added another flavor combination to my brain, because I've never ever experienced that ever. I've had chocolate covered blueberries, but not chocolate covered dates, you know. And so giving yourself to be able to, you know, opportunities to try new things, and simply just think about, like, man, what am I tasting? Or even just kind of focusing on tasting that. As we wrap up this episode, I want to cover a couple more things, but for somebody, you know, just getting into specialty coffee, maybe, what would you recommend? What would you recommend for them to try in coffee, for them to notice some of the nuances a little more clearly? Because I would say, which, correct me if I'm wrong, going and buying a dark roast, picking out flavors is going to be a little difficult. And that's simply just because of the roast process and what goes into roasting a dark roast, and you're burning out some of those sugars or you know, overdeveloping some of them, and it's going to be very hard for you to pick those things out. So what would you recommend a listener to do?
I would say go and pick up a natural processed coffee. It's going to stand out, no matter how good or bad you brew it. Like, whatever you do, you're going to experience something different. And I think at that point, it doesn't matter, like, if you know exactly that's a blueberry, or you know that that's like lemon, that, like, throw that out and just start with simply, like, thinking about what you're tasting. Did this taste the same as the coffee you had yesterday? Like, is this, like, why is it different? And start asking those little questions. Like, forget about, like, trying to define every single flavor you're experiencing. Just enjoy the difference of it. But then again, go and drink that coffee with other people and start asking those questions in a group. And there is no, like, wrong answer. You know what I mean? You're creating language. You're starting to understand that coffee doesn't only taste like coffee. There's more going on there. And start enjoying that process. I think one of the hardest things for me, you mentioned it too, is the intimidation factor. It's like, man, like, if I'm not calling out these flavors, or if I can't taste what the bag says, then, like, I'm doing something wrong. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. If you're enjoying your cup of coffee, you're doing everything right.
That's all that matters.
Right. So from then on, just be intentional and thinking about it, and really helps doing it with people. So I would definitely say.
For sure. I would recommend, if you could, buy 2 very different, you know, bags of coffee. So if you're thinking of, you know, you're used to drinking dark roast, try getting a dark roast and, like, a light roast. Even that, you know, or you know, try getting, like, get a coffee from Ethiopia and then get a Guatemalan coffee.
Exactly. Yep, that's big.
And tasting, but that's what a lot of what also helped me was tasting coffee side by side.
Yep.
Because sometimes if you're just drinking coffee, you go through one bag, go through another, it's hard to remember.
Yep.
But if you literally have them side by side, then you can be able to see, oh, this one's a little different, and here's kind of why I'm tasting these differences. Out of our coffees, what would you say are the most polar opposite flavor profiles right now, what we have?
Oh, man. Definitely. So you have Colombia at one end.
Yeah.
That's for sure. It's your classic chocolatey with a little bit of acidity and like berry, right? Yeah. But the body's chocolatey. You'll notice that pretty quick.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think on the other side, I'd probably say the Guji.
The Guji, yeah.
It's quite different. It has a whole different acidity, different mouthfeel. You're going to experience a much lighter coffee, more delicate, pretty floral, but then it has that berry front forward welcome of like blackberry. So you won't miss that, and you'll smell that. So I think those two coffees side by side, you'll get a broad experience of like how different they are.
For sure. Last but not least, should flavor notes be on a bag of coffee?
Honestly, I don't really care much for flavor notes.
Come on.
I mean, it's a hard one.
Good answer.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Like I like because I like the aspect of reading and making up my own mind on what I would be experiencing. But I feel like we've gotten so far that flavor notes are an objective way to experience coffee, and that's not necessarily true. It's helpful. Yeah, I'm not going to say they're not helpful. They are helpful in understanding what your coffee experience is going to be. But they're not like perfectly defined where it's a guarantee.
And it's more that it's a way for us roasters to be able to communicate in a way to you who are looking to buy a bag of coffee and enjoy a bag of coffee, kind of the ballpark of what you should be expecting. And that hopefully helps you make a better coffee buying decision, because, if you don't like chocolatey coffees, you want a fruit bomb, well, don't buy a coffee that says chocolate on there.
Yeah.
But if you hate fruity coffees, well, don't buy, a coffee that just has blueberry, watermelon and oranges, they're really just guides for you to lead you to make a better decision as for your preferences. Really,
that's why I wouldn't say like get rid of them.
Yeah,
like we're not going to get rid of that reminds us of, because it is helpful.
Yeah,
but I wish we'd change our mind and kind of the whole mindset around like definitive like flavors. You know what I mean?
Of course. Sweet. Well, folks, that is a wrap for our 2-part little mini series on tasting coffee. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Once again, leave a comment on if you're watching this on YouTube. Send us a DM. Share your thoughts with us. We love to engage in conversation. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching or listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.